The Apology of Aristides the Philosopher, translated from the Syriac version. Editor's note: the Apology of Aristides, mentioned by Eusebius, St. Jerome, and other ancient writers, and said to have been the inspiration for the great works of St. Justin Martyr, was considered lost until the 19th century, when an Armenian fragment was discovered. Then, in 1889, the full text in Syriac translation was found in the library of St. Catherine's in Sinai. Ironically, it was then realized the work had never been lost at all. A slightly shortened version of it had been preserved in the well-known life of Saint Barlaam of India by Saint John of Damascus. Since the numerous references to Greek gods would have made little impact on the Indian audience, one may assume that Saint John, writing for a Greek readership, would have found a denunciation of Vedic or Buddhist deities equally meaningless, decided to insert the Apology of Aristides as sort of a rough equivalent of whatever Barlaam actually preached to the Brahmins. Saint Aristides delivered the Apology around the year 125 when Hadrian visited Athens. His memory is kept by the church on 31 of August and 13th of September. Since the Greek version was found in Balaam and Iosaph is widely available online, we here give the longer version preserved in Syriac. Note that there are a number of Syrianisms in this version, cultural rather than theological, such as the reference to Hades as Sheol. The Apology of Aristides. Here follows the defense which Aristides the philosopher made before Hadrian the king on behalf of the reverence for God. All-powerful Caesar, Titus, Hadrianus, Antonius, venerable and merciful from Marcinius, Aristides, and Athenian philosopher. 1. I, O king, by the grace of God, came into this world when I had considered the heaven and the earth and the seas and had surveyed the sun and the rest of creation. I marveled at the beauty in the world. And I perceive that the world and all that is therein are moved by the power of another. And I understood that he who moves them is God, who is hidden in them and veiled by them. And it is manifest that which causes motion is more powerful than that which is moved. But that I should make search concerning this same mover of all as to what his nature, for it seems to me he is indeed unsearchable in his nature, and that I should argue as to the constancy of his government, so as to grasp it fully. This is a vain effort for me, for it is not possible that a man should fully comprehend it. I say, however, concerning this mover of the world, that he is God of all, who made all things for the sake of mankind. And it seems to me that this is reasonable, that one should fear God and should not oppress man. I say then, God is not born, not made, an ever-abiding nature without beginning and without end, immortal, perfect, and incomprehensible. Now, when I say that he is perfect, this means that there is not in him any defects, and he is not in need of anything, but all things are in need of him. And when I say that he is without beginning, this means that everything which has beginning has also an end, and that which has an end may be brought to an end. He has no name, for everything which has a name is kindred to things created. Form he has none, nor yet any union of members, for whatsoever possesses these is kindred to things fashioned. He is neither male nor female. The heavens do not limit him, but the heavens and all things, visible and invisible, receive their bounds from him. Adversary he has none, for there exists not any stronger than he. Wrath and indignation he possesses not, for there is nothing which is able to stand against him. Ignorance and forgetfulness are not in his nature, for he is altogether wisdom and understanding, and in him stands fast all that exists. He requires not sacrifice and liberate and libation, nor even one of the things visible. He requires not any he requires not aught from any, but all living creatures stand in need of him. 2. Since then we have addressed you concerning God, so far as our discourse can bear upon him, let us now come to the race of men, that which we may know of which of them participate in the truth of which we have spoken, and which of them go astray from it. Be clear to you, O king, that there are four classes of men in this world: barbarians and Greeks, Jews and Christians. The barbarians, indeed, trace their origin of their kind of religion from Kronos and from Rhea and their gods. The Greeks, however, Hellenos, who is said to sprung from Zeus, and by Hellenos there were born Aiolos and Xuthos, and there were others descended from Inachos and Phoroneus, and lastly from the Egyptian Dananos, and from Cadmos and Dionysos. The Jews, again, trace the origin of their race from Abraham, who begat Isaac, of whom was born Jacob. And he begat 12 sons, who migrated from Syria to Egypt, and there they were called the nation of Hebrews, by him who made their laws, and at length they were named Jews. The Christians then trace the beginning of their religion from Jesus the Messiah, and he is named Son of God Most High. And it is said that God came down from heaven, and from a Hebrew virgin assumed and clothed himself with flesh, and the Son of God lived in a daughter of man. This is taught in the gospel, as it is called, which a short time was preached among them. And you also, if you will read therein, may perceive the power which belongs to it. This Jesus then was born of the race of the Hebrews, and he had 12 disciples, in order that the purpose of his incarnation might in time be accomplished. But he himself was pierced by the Jews, and he died and was buried. And they say that after 3 days he rose and ascended to heaven. Thereupon these 12 disciples went forth throughout the known parts of the world, and kept showing his greatness with all modesty and uprightness. And hence also those of the present day who believe that preaching are called Christians, and they are become famous. So then there are, as I said above, four classes of men: barbarians, Greeks, Jews, and Christians. Moreover, the wind is obedient to God, the fire to the angels, the waters also to the demons, and the earth to the sons of men. Let us begin then with the barbarians, and go on to the rest of the nations one after another, that we may see which of them hold the truth as to God, and which of them hold error. The barbarians then, as they did not apprehend God, went astray among the elements, and began to worship things created instead of their creator. And for this end they made images and shut them up in shrines. And lo, they worshipped them, guarding them the while with much care, lest their gods be stolen by robbers. And the barbarians did not observe that which acts as guard is greater than that which is guarded, and that everyone who creates is greater than that which is created. If it be then that their gods are too feeble to see their own safety, how will they take thought for the safety of men? Great then is the error into which the barbarians wandered in worshiping lifeless images which can do nothing to help them. And I am led to wonder, O king, at their philosophers, how that even they went astray, and gave the name of gods to images which were made in honor of the elements, and that their sages did not perceive that the elements are also dissoluble and perishable. For if a small part of an element is dissolved or destroyed, the whole of it may be dissolved and destroyed. If then the elements themselves are dissolved and destroyed and forced to be subject to another that is more stubborn than they, and if they are not in their nature gods, why, forsooth, do they call the images which are made in their honor God? Great, then, is the error which the philosophers among them have brought upon their followers. 4. Let us turn now, O king, to the elements themselves, that we may make clear in regard to them that they are not gods, but a created thing, liable to ruin and change, which is of the same nature as man, whereas God is imperishable and unvarying and invisible, while yet he sees and overrules and transforms all things. Those then who believe concerning the earth that it is a god to have hitherto deceived themselves, since it is furrowed and set with plants entrenched, and it takes in the filthy refuse of men and beasts and cattle, and at times it becomes unfruitful. For if it be burnt to ashes, it becomes devoid of life, for nothing germinates from an earthen jar. And besides, if water be collected upon it, it is dissolved together with its products, and lo, it is trodden under foot of man and beast, and receives the blood of the slain. And if it is dug open, filled with the dead, it becomes a tomb for the corpses. But it is impossible that a nature which is holy and worthy and blessed and immortal should allow any one of these things. And hence it appears to us that the earth is not a god, but a creation of God. 5. In the same way, those erred who believe the waters to be gods. For the waters were created for the use of man, and are put under his rule in many ways. For they suffer change and emit impurity, and are destroyed and lose their nature while they are boiled into many substances, and they take colors which do not belong to them. They also are congealed by frost and mingled and permeated with filth of men and beasts, and with the blood of the slain, and being checked by skilled workmen through the restraint of aqueducts, they flow and are diverted against their inclination, and come into gardens and other places in order that they may be collected and issue forth as a means of fertility for man, and that they may cleanse away every impurity and fulfill the service that man requires from them. Wherefore it is impossible that the waters should be a god, but they are the work of God and a part of the world. In like manner, also they who believe that fire is a god erred to no slight extent, for it too was created for the service of men, and is subjected to them in many ways, in the preparation of meats, and by a means of casting metals, and for other ends whereof your majesty is aware, and at the same time it is quenched and extinguished in many ways. Again, they also err to believe the motion of the winds to be a god, for it is well known to us that those winds are under the dominion of another. At times their motion increases, and at times it fails and ceases to command at the command of him who controls them. For they were created by God for the sake of men, in order to supply the necessity of trees, fruits, and seeds, and to bring over the sea ships which convey for men necessaries and goods from places where they are found to places where they are not found, and to govern the quarters of the world. And as for itself, at times it increases and again abates, and in one place brings help, and in another causes disaster, at the bidding of him who rules it. And mankind are too able by known means to confine and keep it in check, in order that it may fulfill them for the service they require from it. And of itself it has not any authority at all, and hence it is impossible that the wind should be called gods, but rather a thing made by God. 6. So also they erred who believe that the sun is a god, for we see that it is moved by the compulsion of another, and revolves and makes its journey and proceeds from sign to sign, rising and setting every day, so as to give warmth for the mingled every every growing thing which is upon the earth. And to it there belongs by comparison a part in common with the rest of the stars in its course. And though it is one in its nature, it is associated with many parts for the supply of the needs of men, and not that according to its own will, but rather according to the will of him who rules it. And hence it is impossible that the sun be a god, but the work of God, and in like manner also the moon and stars. 7. And those who believe that the men of the past, that some of them were gods, they too were much mistaken. For, as you yourself allow, O king, man is constituted of the four elements and of a soul and a spirit, and hence he is called a microcosm. And without any one of these parts, he could not consist. He has a beginning and an end, and he is born and dies. But God, as I said, has none of these things that are in his nature, but is uncreated and imperishable. And hence, it is not possible that we should set up man to be the nature of God. Man, to whom at times when he looks for joy, there comes trouble, and when he looks for laughter, there comes weeping. Who is wrathful and covetous and envious, with other defects as well. And he is destroyed in many ways by the elements and also by the animals. And hence, O king, we are bound to recognize the error of the barbarians, that thereby, since they did not find traces of the true God, they fell aside from the truth, and went after the desire of their imagination, serving the perishable elements and lifeless images, and through their error not apprehending what the true God is. 8. Let us turn further to the Greeks also, that we may know what opinion they hold as to the true God. The Greeks then, because they are more subtle than the barbarians, have gone further astray than the barbarians, inasmuch they have introduced many fictitious gods, and have set up some of them as males and some as females, and in that some of their gods were found who were adulterers, and did murder, and were deluded, and envious, and wrathful, and passionate, and parricides, and thieves, and robbers. And some of them, they say, were crippled and limped, some were sorcerers, and some actually went mad, some played on lyres, and some were given to roaming the hills, and some even died, and some were struck dead by lightning, and some were made serpents, even to men, and some escaped by flight, and some were kidnapped by men, and some indeed were lamented and deployed by men. And some, they say, went down to Sheol, and some were grievously wounded, and some transformed themselves into the likeness of animals to seduce the race of mortal women. And some polluted themselves by lying with males. And some, they say, were wedded to their mothers, and their sisters, and their daughters. And they say of the gods that they committed adultery with the daughters of men, and of these there were born a certain race which also was mortal. And they say that some of the females disputed about beauty and appeared before men for judgment. Thus, O king, have Greeks put forward foulness and absurdity and folly about their gods and about themselves, in that they have called those that are of such a nature gods, who are no gods. And hence mankind have received incitements to commit adultery and fornication, and to steal, and to practice all that is offenses and hated and abhorred. For if they who are called their gods practice all these things which are written above, how much more should men practice them? Men who believe that their gods themselves practice them. And owing to the foulness of this error, there have happened to mankind harassing wars and great famines and bitter captivity and complete desolation. And lo, it was by reason of this alone that they suffered, and that these things came upon them. And while they endured those things, they did not perceive in their mind that for their error those things came upon them. 9. Let us proceed further into their account of the gods, that we may carefully demonstrate all that is said above. First of all, the Greeks bring forward as god Kronos, that is to say Chion, Saturn, and his worshippers sacrifice their children to him, and they burn some of them alive in his honor. And they say that he took to him among his wives Rhea, and begat many children by her. By her too he begat Dios, who is called Zeus. And at length he, Kronos, went mad, and through fear of an oracle that had been made known to him, he began to devour his sons. And from him Zeus was stolen away without his knowledge, and at length Zeus bound him and mutilated the signs of his manhood and flung them into the sea. And hence, as they say in the fable, there was engendered Aphrodite, who was called Astarte. And he, Zeus, cast out Kronos, fettered into darkness. Great then is the error and ignominy which the Greeks have brought forward about the first of their gods, in that they have said all this about him, O king. It is impossible that a god should be bound or mutilated, and if it be otherwise, he is indeed miserable. And after Kronos, they bring forward another god, Zeus. And they say of him that he assumed sovereignty and was king over all the gods. And they say that he changed himself into a beast and to other shapes in order to seduce mortal women and to raise up children for himself. Once, they say, he changed himself into a bull through the love of Europe and Pasiphae. And again, he changed himself into the likeness of gold through the love of Dana, and swam through love of Leda, and to a man through the love of Antiope, and to lightning through the love of Luna, and so by these he begat many children. For by Antiope, they say, he begat Zethus, and Amphion, and by Luna Dionysus, by Alcmena Hercules, by Leto Apollo and Artemis, and by Danae Perseus, and by Leda Castor and Polydeuces, and Helene and Polydeuces, and by Nemenosine he begat 9 daughters, whom they styled the Muses, and by Europe Minos and Radhamos and Sarpedon. And lastly, he changed himself into the likeness of an eagle through his passion for Ganymede the shepherd. By reason of these tales, O king, much evil has arisen among men, who to this day are imitators of their gods, and practice adultery, defile themselves with their mothers and their sisters, and by lying with males, and some make bold even to slay even their own parents. For if he who is said to be the chief and the king of their gods do these things, how much more should his worshippers imitate him? And great is the folly of the Greeks have brought forward in their narrative concerning him. For it is impossible that a god should practice adultery, fornication, or come near to lie with males, or to kill his parents. And if it be otherwise, he is much worse than a destructive demon. 10. Again, they bring forward another god, Hephaestus. And they say of him that he is lame, and a cap is set on his head, and he holds his hands fire tongs and a hammer, and he follows the craft of ironworking, and thereby he may procure the necessaries of his livelihood. Is this a god? Is then this god so very needy? But it cannot be that a god should be needy or lame, else he is very worthless. And further, they bring in another god and call him Hermes. And they say that he is a thief, a lover of avarice, and greedy for gain, and a magician, and mutilated and an athlete, and an interpreter of language. But it is impossible that a god should be a magician or avarice or maimed or craving for what is not his or an athlete. And if it be likewise, he is to be found useless. And after him they bring forward another god, Asclepios, and they say that he is a physician and prepares drugs and plaster that he may supply the necessities of his livelihood. Is then this a god in one? And at length he was struck with lightning by Dios on account of Tenedreos and Lacedaemon, and so he died. If then Asclepios were a god, and when he struck with lightning was unable to help himself, how should he be able to give help to others? But that a divine nature should be in want or destroyed by lightning is impossible. And again they bring forward another god and call him Ares, and they say that he is a warrior and jealous, and that he covets sheep and things which are not his, and he makes gains by his arms. And they say at length he committed adultery with Aphrodite, and was caught by the little boy Eros and Hephaestus, the husband of Aphrodite. But it is impossible that a god should be a warrior or bound or an adulterer. And again they say of Dionysus that he, forsooth, is a god who arranges carousels by night and teaches drunkenness and carries off women who do not belong to him. And at length they say he went mad and dismissed his handmaidens and fled into the desert. And during this madness he ate serpents. And at last he was killed by Titanos. If then Dionysus were a god, and when he was being killed was unable to help himself, how is it possible that he should help others? Heracles, next they bring forward and say that he is a god who hates detestable things, a tyrant and a warrior and destroyer of plagues. And of him they also say at length he became mad and killed his own children, and eased himself into a fire and died. If Heracles is a god, and in all these calamities was unable to rescue himself, how should others ask help from him? But it is impossible that a god should be mad or drunken or slayer of his children or consumed by fire. 11. And after him they bring forward another god and call him Apollon. And they say that he is jealous and inconstant, and at times he holds the bow and quiver, and again the lyre and plectron, and he utters oracles for men that he may receive rewards from them. Is then this God in need of rewards? But in it is an insult that all these things should be found with a god. And after him they bring forward as a goddess Artemis, the sister of Apollo. And they say that she was a huntress, and that she herself used to carry bow and bolts and roam about upon the mountains, leading the hounds to hunt stags or wild bears in the field. But it is disgraceful that a virgin maid should roam alone upon the hills or hunt in the chase for animals. Wherefore is it impossible that Artemis should be a goddess. Again they say Aphrodite, that she is indeed a goddess, and at times she dwells with their gods, but at other times she is a neighbor to men. And once she had Ares as a lover, and again Adonis, who is Tammuz. And once also Aphrodite was wailing and weeping for the death of Tammuz, and they may that she went down to Sheol, that she might redeem Adonis from Persephone, who is the daughter of Sheol or Hades. If then Aphrodite is a goddess and was unable to help her lover at his death, how will she find it possible to help others? And this cannot be listened to, that a divine nature should come weeping and wailing and adultering. And again they say of Tammuz that he is a god, and he is, forsooth, a hunter and adulterer. And they say that he was killed by a wound from a wild boar without being able to help himself. And if he could not help himself, how could he take thought for the human race? But that a god should be an adulterer or a hunter or should die by violence is impossible. And they say of Rhea that she is the mother of their gods. And they say that she had once a lover, at Atius, that she used to delight in depraved men. And at last she raised a lamentation and mourned for Atius, her lover. If then the mother of their gods was unable to help her lover and deliver him from death, how can she help others? So it is disgraceful that a goddess should lament and weep and take delight in depraved men. Again, they introduce Cori and say that she is a goddess, as she was stolen away by Pluto and could not help herself. If then she is a goddess and was unable to help herself, how will she find means to help others? For a god who is stolen away is very powerless. All this, then, O king, have the Greeks brought forward concerning their gods, and they have invented and declared it concerning them. And hence, all men received an impulse to work all profanity and all defilements, and hereby the whole earth was corrupted. 12. The Egyptians, moreover, because they are more base and stupid than every people that is on the earth, have themselves erred more than all, for the deities or religion of the barbarians and of the Greeks did not suffice for them, but they introduced some also of the nature of animals, and said thereof that they were gods, and likewise of creeping things that are found on the dry land and in the waters, and of plants and herbs they said that some of them were gods, and they were corrupted by every kind of delusion and defilement more than every people that is on the earth. For from ancient times they worshipped Isis, and they say that she is a goddess whose husband was Osiris, her brother. And when Osiris was killed by Typhon, his brother, Isis fell with Horus, her son, to Byblus in Syria, and was there for a certain time until her son was grown. And then he contended with Typhon, his uncle, and killed him. And then Isis returned and went about with Horus, her son, and sought for the dead body of Osiris, her lord, bitterly lamenting his death. If then Isis be a goddess, and could not help Osiris, her brother and lord, how could she help another? But it is impossible that a divine nature should be afraid and flee for safety, or should weep and wail, or else it is very miserable. And of Osiris they say, he is a serviceable god, and he was killed by Typhon and was unable to help himself. But it is well known that this cannot be asserted of divinity. And further, they say of his brother Typhon that he is a god who killed his brother and was killed by his brother's son and by his bride, being unable to help himself. And how, pray, is he a god who does not save himself? As the Egyptians then were more stupid than the rest of the nations, these and such like gods did not suffice for them. Nay, but they even apply the name of gods to animals in which there is no soul at all. For some of them worship the sheep, and others calf, and some pig, and others shadfish, and some crocodile, and the hawk, and the fish, and the ibis, and the vulture, and the eagle, and the raven. Some of them worship the cat, and others the turbot fish, some the dog and the adder, some the asp, some and others the lion, and others the garlic, and and others the garlic and onions. Oh gosh. And thorns, and others the tiger, and other such things. And the poor creatures do not see that all these things are nothing, although they daily witness their gods. I'm sorry, y'all. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's my comment. Okay. 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 Oh my gosh. I'm gonna start the sentence over. I'm so sorry. Oh, eventually y'all will get real videos in a real studio where I can edit this part out, but I'm doing the best with what I can right now. Let's try this sentence again. And the poor creatures do not see that all these things are nothing, and also by their fellows. No, although they daily witness their gods being eaten and consumed by men and also by their fellows, while some of them are cremated and some die and decay and become dust, without their observing that they perish in many ways. So the Egyptians have not observed that such things, which are not equal to their own deliverance, are not gods. And if, forsooth, they are weak in the case of their own deliverance, whence have they the power to help in the case of the deliverance of their worshippers? Great then is the error into which the Egyptians wandered, greater indeed than that of any people which is upon the face of the earth. 13. But it is a marvel, O king, with regard to the Greeks, who surpass all other peoples in their manner of life and reasoning, how they have gone astray after dead idols and lifeless images. And yet they see their gods in their hands of their artificers being sawn out and planed and docked and hacked short and charred and ornamented and being altered by them in every kind of way. And when they grow old, they are worn away through lapse of time, and when they are molten and crushed to powder, I wonder, did they not perceive concerning them that they are not gods? And as for those who did not find deliverance for themselves, how can they serve the distress of men? But even the writers and philosophers among them have wrongly alleged that the gods are as such as are made in honor of God Almighty, and they err in seeking to liken them to God, whom man has not at any time seen, nor can see unto what he is like. Herein too they err, in asserting the deity that any such thing as deficiency can be present to it, as when they say he receives sacrifice and requires burnt offering and libation and immolations of men and temples, but God is not in need. And none of these things is necessary to him, and it is clear that men err in these things they imagine. For their writers and their philosophers represent and declare that the nature of all their gods is one, and they have not apprehended God, our Lord, who, while he is one, is in all. They err therefore. For if the body of a man, while it is many in its parts, is not in dread one member of another, but since it is united body, wholly agreed with himself, even so also God is one in his nature. The single essence is proper to him, since he is uniform in his nature and his essence, and he is not afraid of himself. If then the nature of the gods is one, it is not proper that a god should either pursue or slay or harm a god. If then if then gods be pursued and wounded by gods, and some kidnapped and some struck dead by lightning, it is obvious that the nature of their gods is not one, and hence it is known, O king, that it is a mistake when they reckon to bring the natures of their gods under a single nature. If then it becomes to us to admire a God which is seen and does not see, how much more praiseworthy is it that one should believe in a nature which is invisible and all-seeing? And if it further is fitting that one should approve of the handiworks of a craftsman, how much more is it fitting that one should glorify the creator of the craftsman? For behold, when the Greeks made their laws, they did not perceive that by their laws they condemned their gods. For if their laws are righteous, their gods are unrighteous, since they have transgressed the law in killing one another, and practicing sorcery, and committing adultery, and in robbing and stealing, and in lying with males, and by others practices as well. For if their gods were right in doing all these things as they described, then the laws of the Greeks are unrighteous, and in not being made according to the will of their gods. And in that case, the whole world is gone astray. For the narratives about their gods are some of myths, and some of them nature poems, natural, and some of them hymns and elegies. The hymns, indeed, and elegies are empty words and noise. But these nature poems, even if they be made as they say, still those are not gods who do such things and suffer and endure such things. And those myths are shallow tales with no depth whatsoever in them. Let us come now, O King, to the history of the Jews also, and see what opinion they have as to God. The Jews say that God is one, the creator of all, and omnipotent, and that it is not right that any other should be worshipped except this God alone. And herein they appear to approach the truth more than all the nations, especially in that they worship God and not his works. And they imitate God by the philanthropy which prevails among them. For they have compassion on the poor, and they release the captives, and bury the dead, and do such things as these, which are acceptable before God, and well pleasing also to men, which customs they have received from their forefathers. Nevertheless, they too erred from true knowledge, and in their imagination they conceived that it is God they serve, whereas by their mode of observance it is to the angels and not to God that their service is rendered. As when they celebrate Sabbaths in the beginning of months, the feast of unleavened bread, and a great fast, and fasting and circumcision, and the purification of meats, which things, however, they do not observe perfectly. 15. But the Christians, O King, while they went about and made search, have found the truth. And as we learn from their writings, they have come nearer to the truth in genuine knowledge than the rest of the nations. For they know and trust God, the creator of heaven and earth, in whom and from whom all things, to whom there is no other God as companion, from whom they receive commandments, which they engraved upon their minds and observed in hope and expectation of the world which is to come. Wherefore they do not commit adultery, nor fornication, nor bear false witness, nor embezzle what is held in pledge, nor covet what is not theirs. They honor their father and mother, show kindness to those near to them, and whenever they are judges, they judge uprightly. They do not worship idols made in the image of man, and whatsoever they would do, they would not that others should not do unto them, they do not do to others. And of the food which is consecrated to idols they do not eat, for they are pure. And their oppressors appease it, comfort, and make them their friends. They do good to their enemies, and their women, O king, are as pure as virgins, and their daughters are modest, and their men keep themselves from every unlawful union and from all uncleanness, in the hope of recompense to come in the other world. Further, if one or other of them have bondmen and bondwomen or children, through love towards them, they persuade them to become Christians. And when they have done so, they call them brethren without distinction. They do not worship strange gods, and they go their way in all modesty and cheerfulness. Falsehood is not found among them, and they love one another, and from widows they do not turn away their esteem, and they deliver the orphan from him who treats him harshly, and he who has given to him who is not, without boasting. And when they see a stranger, they take him into their homes and rejoice over him as a very brother, for they do not call them brethren after the flesh, but brethren after the Spirit of God. And whenever one of their poor passes from the world, each one of them, according to his ability, gives heed to him and carefully sees to his burial. And if they hear that one of their number is imprisoned or afflicted on account of the name of their Messiah, all of them anxiously minister to his necessity. And if it is possible to redeem him, they set him free. And if there are among them any that is poor and needy, And if they have no spare food, they fast for 2 or 3 days in order to supply the needy their lack of food. They observe the precepts of their Messiah with much care, living justly and soberly as the Lord their God commanded them. Every morning, every hour, they give thanks and praise to God for his loving kindness toward them. And for their food and their drink, they offer thanksgiving to him. And if any righteous a man among them passes from the world, they rejoice and offer thanks to God. And they escort his body as if he were setting out from one place to another near. And when a child has been born to one of them, they give thanks to God. And if moreover it happens to die in childhood, they give thanks to God the more, for as one who has passed through the world without sins. And further, if they see that any one of them dies in his ungodliness or in his sins, for him they grieve bitterly, and the sorrow as for one who goes to meet his doom. 16. Such, O King, is the commandment of the law of the Christians, and such is their manner of life. As men who know God, they ask him from him petitions which are fitting for him to grant and for them to receive, and thus they employ their whole lifetime. And since they know the loving kindness of God towards them, behold, for their sake the glorious things which are in the world flow forth to view. And verily, they are those who found the truth when they went about and made search for it. And from what we considered, we learned that they alone come near to knowledge of truth. And they do not proclaim in the ears of the multitude the kind deeds that they do, but are careful that no one should notice them. And they conceal their giving just as he who finds treasure conceals it. And they strive to be righteous as those who expect to behold their Messiah, and to receive from him with great glory and the promises made concerning them. And as for their words and their precepts, O King, and their glorying in their worship, and the hope of earning according to the work of each one of them their recompense, which they look for in another world, you may learn these from their writings. It is enough for us to have shortly informed you, your Majesty, concerning the conduct and the truth of the Christians. For great indeed and wonderful is their doctrine to him who will search into it and reflect upon it. And verily, this is a new people, and there is something divine in the midst of them. Take then their writings and read therein, and lo, you will find that I have not put forth these things on my own authority, nor spoken thus as their advocate. But since I read in their writings what I was fully assured of these things, as also of things which are to come. And for this reason, I constrain to declare the truth of such as care for it and seek the world to come. And to me, there is no doubt that the earth abides through the supplication of the Christians. But the rest of the nations err and cause error in wallowing before the elements of the world, since beyond these their mental vision will not pass, and they search about as if in darkness, because they will not recognize the truth. And like drunken men, they reel and jostle one another. 17. Thus far, O King, I have spoken. For concerning that which remains, as is said above, there are found in other writings things which are hard to utter and difficult for one to narrate, which are not only spoken in words, but also wrought out in deeds. Now the Greeks, O King, as they follow base practices in intercourse with males, and a mother and and a mother and a sister and a daughter, impute their monstrous impurity in turn to Christians. But the Christians are just and good, and the truth is set before their eyes, and their spirit is long suffering, and therefore they know the error of these Greeks and are persecuted by them. They bear and endure it. For the most part, they have compassion on them as men who are destitute of knowledge. And on their side, they offer prayer that these may repent of their error And when it happens that one of them has repented, he is ashamed before the Christians of the works which were done by him. And he makes confession to God, saying, I did these things in ignorance. And when he purifies his hearts and his sins are forgiven him, because he committed them in ignorance in the former time, when he used to blaspheme and speak evil of the true knowledge of the Christians. And assuredly, the race of the Christians is more blessed than all the men who are upon the face of the earth. Henceforth, let the tongues of those who utter vanity and harass the Christians be silent, and hereafter let them speak the truth. For it is a very serious consequence to them that they should worship the true God rather than worship a senseless sound. And verily, whenever is spoken in the mouth of the Christians is of God, and their doctrine is the gateway of light. Wherefore, let all who are without the knowledge of God draw near thereto, and they will receive incorruptible words, which are from all time and from eternity. So shall they appear before the awful judgment, which through Jesus the Messiah destined to come upon the whole human race. The Apology of Aristides the Philosopher is finished.